Sue the Shooter. Now, each and every week here on the program, you're probably used to hearing Sue say hello to the co-host. Usually she says hello to everyone, and the conversation goes in a million different ways. I know, like I said, we have a lot of new listeners, and many of you hear Sue the Shooter each and every week here on the program and say, who is this? What is this? What exactly is this supposed to be? Way back in the early days of the show, there was an article that friend of the show, Dan Leonard, wrote called Confessions of a Ring Rat that I read here on the air. And that was the beginning of Sue the Shooter on the program. And it's been such a long time. And so many new listeners are here that I thought it would be a good time to revisit this article by Dan Leonard and once again explain the origins of Sue the Shooter. Now, this time I'm very lucky because I have Mr. Jim Cornette here to help me with this article.
You are correct. And thank you, Brian, for this opportunity. Sue Shooter is a ring rat and makes no apologies about it. As a young woman and devoted fan in the heyday of World Championship Wrestling in Australia, Melbourne-based Sue rooted some of the wrestling's biggest overseas stars. She'd always been attracted to the wrestlers, watching them on TV and then seeing them live at Melbourne's Festival Hall. But Sue finally became a rat on May 9th, 1970, 4 days after turning 19. She went to a show with a friend, and both were invited by Jerry Briscoe up to his hotel room. Once they arrived, he told them to take their clothes off and give him a blowjob or get out of his room.
I'll have to be honest with you, I shit myself. I had no idea what I was thinking. I got half undressed, and Jerry took the rest off.
And then Sue blew the later NWA. He'll never speak to me again for reading this report. Sue blew the later NWA World Tag Team Champion.
It was the first time I'd ever done it. I didn't even know what it meant. Both of us did it at the same time. Tony Parisi came up later, and we took care of him as well. Then Eric Froelich and Mark Lewin. Then Gary Hart and Ivan Koloff.
It was allegedly a momentous weekend for Sue as she was initiated into the ranks of rattiness, although she didn't fuck any of the guys that night.
It was only blowjobs for two of the guys that I can remember, Jerry and Tony. It was fantastic, going to the wrestlers and being involved with them physically.
Sue also got her first inkling that not everything was kosher in pro wrestling.
The heels and the faces were mixing together. That's when I was shocked, 'cause we were marks at that stage.
Sue quickly developed a soft spot for wrestler Gary Hart, who most modern fans would remember as a heel manager warring against the Von Erichs in Dallas during the 1980s.
One time I went to Gary's room, and he later introduced me to Kurt and Carl Von Steiger as his girlfriend. If Gary told me to jump, I'd say, how high? Even to this day, I adore Gary. If he came back to Australia now, I'd still sleep with him.
But Hart wasn't the first wrestler Sue fucked. That honor went to midget grappler Lord Littlebrook in 1971.
I was so naive in those days. I honestly thought I wanted to go to the toilet, but it was just me having orgasms all the time. He gave me my first orgasm 4 times in 2 hours.
Lord Littlebrook was an enormous man. Sue said most of the Americans expected a blowjob and nothing more, probably because it was healthier and safer than straight sex.
They weren't interested in screwing. They didn't know who you'd been with, and you didn't know who they'd been with.
Never at any time was Sue concerned about pregnancy or STDs.
I was with one of the other midgets. He was very strange in his sexual ways. He believed in anal sex. His name was Wee Willie Wilson from Florida, and he was very well hung. After that, I was with Butch Miller from the Bushwhackers. Before, he was a sheep herder. When he first came here from New Zealand in 1971, he was a destroyer under a mask. I met him through Tiger Jeet Singh. I caught up with Butch in Anaheim, California in 1996, and I think he remembered me. He was nice.
And later on, he also had the sheep. During the early 70s, Sue fucked or sucked a veritable who's who of professional wrestling, including Maniac Mark Lewin, Mr. Fuji, Ivan Koloff, and the Von Steigers.
Half the time you'd go to the hotel on a Saturday afternoon and you'd end up in some wrestler's hotel room for sex. That's what you went for. I didn't really know of the concept of rats, but I found out later what I was doing was being a rat. And a lot of the guys would refer to you as ring rats or arena rats.
Sue's rattiness continued as she got older with the WWF's tours of Australia in 1985 and 1986.
It was fun, and I have no regrets whatsoever. Have I been used? Yeah. I felt humiliated by the Iron Sheik. He read a copy of Penthouse while he was getting a blowjob from me. Also, Hercules Hernandez couldn't get it up due to drugs.
But there were happier memories of those tours.
I was with Fuji again in 86, and Matt Bourne. The best fuck of the lot was Moondog Spot Larry Latham. He was the best screw I ever had. The craziest in the ring wild man was the gentlest man in bed.
Sue first went overseas to see wrestling in 1984.
I didn't rat for the first time I was overseas, but the second time I did with Memphis jobber Black Shadow, Tim Hyde. I didn't rat anyone famous, not for want of trying. I would have done Jerry Lawler if I could, but I think it would have spoiled our friendship.
The last overseas wrestler Sue fucked was Bobby Blaze during the Wrestle Riot tours of Australia in 1993.
There's nothing wrong with ratting. I have a 21-year-old daughter who's into the wrestling, and if she wasn't in a relationship, I would love her to become a rat, because she's stunning. If my daughter said, Mom, I'm ending the relationship, will you introduce me to some wrestlers? I'd say yes. Back in the 60s and 70s, there was a mother and daughter who were rats. I'm not interested in sleeping with the average man, because he's boring. But if he's a wrestler, then I'll sleep with him. It's an obsession. I'm still a rat. If the guys were here, definitely. At age 46, I'd love to be.
And ladies and gentlemen, that is Dan Leonard's Confessions of a Ring Rat, the story of Sue Shooter, known on this show as Sue the Shooter.
46, you just said. How retro is this article?
Press time, I believe, was sometime in the 90s. So.
Yeah, that would be about 66 now, eh?
What title belt is Bobby Blaze holding up in this happy picture of himself here?
That, believe it or not, I believe it's from Smoky Mountain as the United States Junior Heavyweight Championship, possibly. I'm not sure.
I think you're right. I think that is what that belt is. But, like I said, that is, for all of you new to the show, the origin of Sue the Shooter.
And completely allegedly on the part of any involvement Jerry Briscoe might have I had, and obviously I had no idea of the material coming up. He sent me, folks, my Mr. Host to me. You sent me the redacted version, so I didn't know what Sue was going to say until what Sue Shitty Snoo was going to say.
Well, Sue the Shooter. And of course, if anyone has any information about the whereabouts of Wee Willie Wilson, we are still looking to speak to him here on the program.
I thought you were going to talk to Sue. I'd actually like to meet Sue after that fucking promo. She could stand up to one of those Mid-South rats. Well, they were a hardy breed. As a matter of fact, this was a quote from one of the girls at one. Are you going to fuck me or what? That was what one of the girls at the matches actually once uttered in my presence. Let's say. Was that Oklahoma or Louisiana? Louisiana. They were very, very demanding. The Cajun ladies down in Louisiana, very demanding people. Are you going to fuck me or what? With that accent, it was. Did any of the boys ever worry back then, especially if you were a heel, that one of these rats would try to lure them in and then, try to slit their throat in the night or something? I would have thought you were going to go with the, paternity suit type of forced marriage, payoff, whatever, instead of slit your throat in the night. I don't think anybody, by the time that they would let them sleep in their presence or sleep in their, you know what I'm saying, there was probably a level of trust established, but I never heard anybody actually worried about that. Well, Sue the Shooter, number 7 this week in the top 10